Roman Empire, Episode 3. The Seven Kings of Rome. From Romulus to the fall of the monarchy. Opening, a city before the Republic. Before Rome became a republic, before it commanded legions across the Mediterranean, before senators debated war and peace beneath marble columns, Rome was remembered as a city of kings. These kings stand at the edge of history and legend. Their names come to us from later Roman writers, especially Livy and Dionysius of Halicarnassus, who wrote centuries after the events they described. For that reason, we must approach them carefully. We are not walking through a perfectly documented age, we are walking through memory, tradition, political myth, and fragments of early history. Yet the stories of the seven kings mattered deeply to the Romans themselves. They explained why Rome had certain religious rituals, why its army was organized in a particular way, why its citizens were divided into classes, why the Senate existed, and why monarchy eventually became a hated word in Roman political culture. The kings were not only rulers in ancient stories, they were symbols of stages in Rome's growth. One king represented foundation, another represented religion, another represented war, another represented expansion, construction, reform, and finally, tyranny. The traditional list begins with Romulus, the founder of the city. After him came Numa Pompilius, remembered as the peaceful lawgiver of religion. Then came Tullus Hostilius, the warrior king. Ancus Marcius followed, combining war with public works. The final three kings were connected with the Etruscan world: Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus. Through them, Rome was remembered as changing from a small settlement of huts into a more organized urban state, with temples, walls, drainage systems, social classes, and a stronger monarchy. In this episode, we do not treat every royal story as simple fact. Instead, we listen to what these stories reveal. They show how Romans imagined their beginnings. They show the values Romans believed had shaped their city: courage, discipline, religion, expansion, public order, and suspicion of absolute power. The Rome of the kings was still small compared with the empire that would later dominate Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. But in these early royal traditions, we can already see the foundations of Roman identity beginning to form. Romulus, the founder and the first king. Romulus stands at the beginning of Rome's political imagination. According to tradition, he founded the city in 753 BCE after the death of his twin brother Remus. This story is not simply a tale of two brothers. It is a myth about violence, boundaries, sacred space, and political authority. The killing of Remus, whether symbolic or legendary, suggested that Rome's birth was linked to conflict from the very beginning. The city was born not in peace, but in a struggle over who had the right to rule and where the walls of the city should stand. As king, Romulus was remembered as the creator of Rome's first institutions. Later Romans believed he organized the population into political and military groups, created early divisions among citizens, and established the Senate as a council of leading men. The Senate, in this early form, was not yet the powerful republican body it would later become. But the idea was important. Rome, even under kings, was imagined as a city where rulers consulted elders and aristocratic families. The Roman state was never remembered as the possession of one man alone. Romulus also became associated with the problem of population. A city needed people, and Rome's early traditions say that Romulus opened an asylum, a place of refuge, inviting fugitives, strangers, exiles, and adventurers to join the new community. This image is powerful because Rome would later become famous for absorbing outsiders. Unlike some ancient cities that defined citizenship narrowly, Rome gradually developed a remarkable ability to incorporate defeated enemies and foreign peoples. The legend of the asylum presents this habit as something present from the beginning. The most famous episode of Romulus's reign after the founding is the conflict with the Sabines. According to tradition, Rome lacked women, so the Romans seized Sabine women during a festival. War followed. But in the story, the Sabine women intervened between their Roman husbands and Sabine fathers, stopping the bloodshed. The result was not simple conquest, but union. Romans and Sabines joined into one community. Whether or not this event happened as described, the story carried a message. Rome grew by violence, but also by integration. Romulus's death was just as mythical as his birth. Some traditions say he disappeared during a storm and was taken up to heaven, becoming the god Quirinus. Others suggest that senators may have killed him because his rule had become too harsh. This double memory is important. Rome honored Romulus as founder, warrior, and divine ancestor. But it also preserved a suspicion that kings could become dangerous when power became too concentrated. Even at the beginning, Roman monarchy contained the shadow of future resistance. Numa Pompilius, religion, law, and sacred order. After Romulus, the Romans remembered a very different kind of king. Numa Pompilius, traditionally the second king of Rome, was not celebrated as a conqueror. He was remembered as a peaceful ruler, a Sabine, and a man of deep religious wisdom. If Romulus gave Rome its body, Numa gave it a soul. Roman tradition credited him with organizing the sacred life of the city, creating priesthoods, rituals, calendars, and customs that connected public life with the will of the gods. This matters because religion in Rome was not private in the modern sense. It was part of government, law, war, agriculture, family, and public memory. Romans believed that the safety of the state depended on maintaining the Pax Deorum, the peace with the gods. To neglect ritual was not simply a personal failure, it could endanger the whole community. Numa's story therefore explains why Roman political life became so deeply ritualized. Before generals fought battles, priests observed omens. Before assemblies met, auspices could be taken. Before treaties were made, sacred formulas mattered. Numa was traditionally connected with important priestly offices. Later Romans credited him with institutions such as the pontifices, who supervised religious law, the flemines, priests devoted to major gods, and the Vestal Virgins, priestesses who guarded the sacred fire of Vesta. The historical accuracy of these specific attributions is uncertain, but the tradition itself tells us something true about Roman culture. Romans believed that stable power required religious order. A city could not survive through weapons alone. It needed rituals, memory, and discipline before the divine. Numa was also associated with the calendar. This is significant because a calendar is more than a method of counting days. It organizes the rhythm of public life. It determines when citizens work, when courts operate, when festivals take place, when armies may march, and when sacred days interrupt ordinary time. To credit Numa with calendar reform was to say that he civilized Roman time itself. He transformed a rough warrior community into a city that lived according to sacred order. The contrast between Romulus and Numa became one of Rome's most meaningful patterns. Romulus represented force, foundation, and military energy. Numa represented peace, religion, and law. Roman identity would always need both. Rome admired conquest, but it feared uncontrolled violence. Rome honored the gods, but it used religion as part of public discipline. In Numa, later Romans saw the king who taught the city restraint. After the blood and ambition of Romulus, Numa's reign was remembered as a quiet age of piety, ritual, and order. Tullus Hostilius and Ancus Marcius, war, expansion, and the first growth of Rome. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, returned Rome to the world of war. His very name became associated with hostility and military force. If Numa had closed the gates of violence, Tullus opened them again. Roman tradition remembered him as a fierce ruler who expanded Roman power and fought against neighboring communities. The most famous story of his reign concerns Alba Longa, the ancient Latin city connected with the ancestry of Romulus and Remus. In Roman memory, Alba was not just another enemy, it was a kind of older mother city. The conflict between Rome and Alba Longa was traditionally decided by a duel between two sets of triplet brothers, the Roman Horatii and the Alban Curiatii. Instead of both armies destroying each other, the champions fought on behalf of their cities. The surviving Roman, Publius Horatius, defeated the Albans and secured Roman dominance. This story is almost certainly legendary in form, but its meaning is clear. Rome was imagined as absorbing its own ancestral rival. The younger city overcame the older one and inherited its people, prestige, and destiny. After Alba Longa rebelled, Tullus was said to have destroyed it and transferred its population to Rome. This detail is important because it repeats an early Roman pattern: conquest followed by incorporation. Rome did not merely destroy enemies and leave empty land behind. In its own memory, Rome enlarged itself by bringing defeated peoples into the city. Alban nobles were supposedly added to the Roman aristocracy. Ordinary people increased the population. The city grew by swallowing its rivals and transforming them into Romans. The fourth king, Ancus Marcius, was remembered as a bridge between Numa's religious order and Tullus's military aggression. He was said to be the grandson of Numa, but he also fought wars and expanded Roman territory. This balanced image made him a king of practical development. Tradition credits him with extending Roman control toward the mouth of the Tiber River and founding Ostia, Rome's early port. Whether this happened exactly as told is uncertain, but the association is historically meaningful. Rome's future depended on access to the river, salt routes, trade, and the sea. Ancus was also linked with public works, including the first bridge across the Tiber, the Pons Sublicius, and the settlement of the Aventine Hill. These stories show Rome becoming more than a hilltop community. It was beginning to control movement, water, roads, trade, and territory. The Tiber River was central to this development. It connected inland Latium with the coast and made Rome a meeting place between different peoples. Rome's geography was never accidental. The city rose where hills, river crossing, trade, and defense came together. By the end of the first four kings, Roman tradition had created a pattern of development. Romulus founded the city. Numa gave it religion. Tullus made it a military power among its neighbors. Ancus expanded its territory and infrastructure. These figures may not be fully historical in the modern sense, but together they form a curriculum of early state formation. A city needs population, sacred legitimacy, military capacity, and practical control of land and movement. In the Legends of the Kings, Rome explained how it acquired all four. The Etruscan turn, Tarquinius Priscus, and the urbanization of Rome. The fifth king, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, marks a major shift in Rome's royal tradition. He was associated with Etruria, the powerful region north of Rome. The Etruscans were among the most sophisticated peoples in early Italy. Their cities had strong aristocracies, impressive tombs, religious specialists, craftsmen, traders, and urban traditions. Their influence on early Rome was significant. Through the Tarquins, Roman memory admitted something important. Rome did not develop alone. It absorbed ideas, symbols, and techniques from neighboring cultures. Tarquinius Priscus was said to have come to Rome from the Etruscan city of Tarquinii. His rise reflected both ambition and mobility. In the tradition, he gained the favor of Ancus Marcius and eventually became king. Under him, Rome became more visibly urban. Later Romans credited him with major construction projects, including work on drainage, public spaces, and entertainment areas. The famous Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great drainage system, was connected in tradition with this age. Whether completed later or developed in stages, drainage was essential to transforming marshy lowlands into usable civic space. This is one of the most important developments in early Rome. The area that would become the Roman Forum was once a low, wet valley between hills. To make it the political and religious center of the city required engineering. Draining land was not glamorous like a battlefield victory, but it was fundamental to urban civilization. A city needs dry ground, meeting places, markets, roads, temples, and public order. The royal period, especially under the Etruscan-linked kings, was remembered as the time when Rome began to look like a true city. Tarquinius Priscus was also associated with symbols of royal power. Roman tradition connected Etruscan influence with the fasces, the curule chair, the purple-bordered toga, and ceremonial displays of authority. These symbols would later survive into the Republic, but with an important change. The Romans removed the king, yet kept many signs of power and adapted them to republican magistrates. This is one of Rome's great habits. It did not always destroy the past. It reused it, disciplined it, and gave it a new constitutional meaning. Military success was also part of Tarquinius Priscus's image. He was said to have fought Latin and Sabine enemies, increasing Rome's prestige. But his deeper importance lies in what his reign represents structurally. Rome was entering a wider Italian world of competition and exchange. Etruscan, Latin, and Sabine influences mixed in the city. Architecture, ritual, warfare, and political symbols developed together. Rome's later greatness came partly from this ability to learn from others without losing its own identity. Under Tarquinius Priscus, the story of Rome becomes less like a village legend and more like the history of an emerging city-state. Servius Tullius, census, class, and the organization of citizenship. Servius Tullius, the sixth king, was remembered as one of the most important reformers in early Roman history. His origins were surrounded by legend. Some stories described him as born from a captive woman in the royal household. Others gave him signs of divine favor. Whatever the mythical details, his political memory was clear. Servius represented organization. He was the king who classified the Roman people, gave structure to citizenship, and connected military duty with property. The most famous Servian reform was the census. A census is not merely a count of population. In early Rome, it meant arranging citizens according to wealth, military obligation, and political status. Citizens who could afford better armor served in heavier military roles. Those with less property had lighter obligations. The army and society were linked. Rome did not yet have the professional legions of later centuries. Military service depended on citizens who equipped themselves according to their means. Property, duty, and honor were bound together. Servius was also credited with organizing the Comitia Centuriata, the assembly of centuries. In this system, citizens were divided into voting units that reflected military and property classes. The wealthier classes had greater influence because they were called to vote first and were arranged in more politically powerful centuries. This tells us something essential about Rome. Roman citizenship was meaningful, but it was not equal in a modern democratic sense. The Roman state valued participation, but it gave more weight to property, age, military capacity, and social rank. Tradition also credits Servius with expanding the city and building defensive walls, often called the Servian Wall, though the surviving stone walls are mostly from a later period. Still, the association of Servius with walls matters. Walls define a city physically and symbolically. They mark the difference between inside and outside, citizen and stranger, sacred urban space, and the open world beyond. In Roman memory, Servius was the king who gave Rome clearer shape as a city and clearer structure as a community. Another major tradition connected to Servius was the organization of tribes by territory rather than purely by kinship. This would have been an important step in state formation. A society based only on clans and noble families is different from a society organized by residence, census, and public obligation. Rome was gradually becoming a state that could govern people more systematically. The Servian reforms, whether created all at once or developed over time, symbolized this transformation. Servius Tullius became especially important to later Romans because his reforms helped explain the Republic before the Republic existed. The census, citizen classes, assemblies, and military organization were all central to Roman public life. By placing their origin under a king, Roman tradition suggested that monarchy had once contributed to order and institutions. But Servius's fate also warned against royal violence. He was said to have been murdered through the ambition of his daughter Tullia and her husband, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus. Reform gave way to tyranny, and the final king entered Roman memory in darkness. Tarquinius Superbus, Tyranny and the Hatred of Kings. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the seventh and final king of Rome, was remembered not as a founder or reformer, but as a tyrant. His title, Superbus, means the proud or the arrogant. Roman tradition shaped him as the opposite of lawful kingship. He ruled without proper respect for the Senate, He used fear. He relied on force. He was accused of treating Rome not as a community with customs and institutions, but as his personal possession. Whether every detail is historical or not, the political message was unmistakable. Tarquinius Superbus was not remembered only for cruelty. He was also linked with major works of power and prestige. The great temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill was traditionally associated with the Tarquin dynasty and completed around the beginning of the Republic. This temple became one of the most sacred centers of Roman public life. It reminded Romans that even the hated kings had contributed to Rome's religious and urban grandeur. Roman memory was rarely simple. A bad ruler could still leave behind powerful institutions and monuments. Yet the final king's reign became a lesson in the dangers of monarchy. The decisive story was the rape of Lucretia by Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son. Lucretia was remembered as a noble Roman woman whose violation became a public crisis. After revealing the crime, she took her own life. Her death provoked outrage among Roman aristocrats, especially Lucius Junius Brutus, who led the movement to expel the Tarquins. The event became one of the most famous moral and political stories in Roman history. To modern readers, the Lucretia story must be approached with care. It is shaped by ancient ideas of honor, family, gender, and public virtue. But for Romans, it explained why monarchy became intolerable. The king's household had violated the dignity of a Roman family, and therefore the whole political order had to change. Personal abuse became constitutional revolution. The crime of one royal son became the symbol of a corrupt system. The monarchy fell because Romans believed no family should stand above the law. In 509 BCE, according to traditional chronology, the Tarquins were expelled and the Roman Republic began. The office of king was abolished. In its place, Romans created annually elected magistrates, especially 2 consuls, so that no single man would hold supreme power for life. This was not democracy in the modern sense, and aristocratic families remained extremely powerful. But the principle was revolutionary in Roman memory. Power had to be limited, shared, and temporary. From this point onward, the word rex, king, became politically poisonous in Rome. For centuries, ambitious men would be accused of wanting to become king. The fear of monarchy shaped Roman politics from the early Republic all the way to Julius Caesar. When Caesar was suspected of seeking royal power, the old memory of Tarquins still mattered. The fall of the monarchy was not just an ancient episode, it became a permanent warning inside Roman political culture. Conclusion: what the 7 kings meant to Rome. The 7 kings of Rome are not simply 7 biographies. They are a historical structure, a sequence of meanings through which Romans explained the making of their city. Romulus gave Rome foundation, population, warlike courage, and the first image of political authority. Numa gave Rome religion, ritual, and sacred discipline. Tullus Hostilius gave Rome military aggression and the conquest of older Latin rivals. Ancus Marcius gave Rome expansion, infrastructure, and the movement toward the sea. Then the Etruscan age transformed the city more deeply. Tarquinius Priscus represented urbanization, royal ceremony, engineering, and Rome's openness to outside influence. Servius Tullius represented census, class, military organization, and the structuring of citizenship. Tarquinius Superbus represented the danger of unchecked power and the moral crisis that made monarchy unbearable. Together, the kings formed a kind of Roman origin curriculum. Each one explained a part of the city that later Romans inherited. Historically, we cannot prove every speech, every reform, or every dramatic scene. The early centuries of Rome are covered in mist. Archaeology shows growth, contact, urban development, and social change, but not always the exact royal events later authors described. Still, the royal tradition remains valuable because it reveals how Romans understood themselves. They believed their city was built through a combination of violence and law, religion and war, foreign influence and native discipline, aristocratic leadership, and public obligation. The monarchy also explains one of Rome's greatest political contradictions. Rome hated kings, but it admired authority. It rejected lifelong monarchy, but it preserved hierarchy. It feared tyranny, but it celebrated command. Roman history would repeatedly return to this tension. The Republic would be built on the rejection of kingship, yet its generals would grow powerful through conquest. Its magistrates would be temporary, yet its aristocrats would dominate public life. Its citizens would praise liberty, yet Rome would build one of the largest empires in world history. As we leave the age of the Seven Kings, we stand at the threshold of a new political world. The royal city has gained walls, temples, rituals, assemblies, classes, and memories of violence. The Tarquins have been expelled. The word king has become a warning. In the next stage of Roman history, Rome will attempt something more difficult than founding a city. It will attempt to govern itself without a monarch. And from that experiment, the Roman Republic will be born.